Welcome to another episode of Sales Wisdom Podcast. We've got Douglas Cole with us. He is a LinkedIn leader, an educator, and the author of the Sales MBA, How to Influence Corporate Buyer. This podcast has been brought to you by podbuyer.com. If you want to start, scale, or be invited to a podcast, you can hit me up. That's my company, my podcasting agency, podbuyer.com. Douglas, welcome to the pods. Can you tell us a bit more about what you're into nowadays?
Yeah, it's great to be here, Charles. I basically wear two hats, professionally speaking. So the first hat is as a sales leader at LinkedIn. I lead a team of salespeople who are trying to grow our relationships with corporate buyers, enterprise buyers. And then the second hat I wear is basically a teaching hat. You know, I have a variety of teaching roles. University of Toronto, York University, with some startup accelerators. I'm very interested in just learning and then communicating what I've learned, in a classroom and newsletter. So those are the two hats.
Love it. And what you're up to mostly nowadays, how do you split your time, energy, and spent in each area?
Well, I think it's definitely around 70% day job and then 30% the second hat around all the different components of the teaching piece. Yeah, that's the approximate.
Why do you still teach? What's important in teaching others and showing them the right path nowadays?
Well, I guess my reason for doing it personally is that there's a virtuous circle. I'm fundamentally driven to learn. That's what gives me energy. That's what keeps me stimulated. And the best way to learn is to force yourself to organize and distill the information that you're taking in such a way that you can very clearly and crisply communicate it to somebody else. And so that's the feedback loop I'm trying to create. And what gives me kicks, professionally and personally, is when I feel as though I've done that well, when I feel as though someone has got what I got and it's had a similar effect on them. So that's the virtuous circle I'm trying to create.
Has your curriculum changed since the venue of AI? How do you think that's going to affect the new students and their introduction into this market?
You mean in sales in particular? Yeah. Well, I think that it is going to change probably in a few ways. First of all, I think that the way that you build trust with a buyer is going to change. I think that there's going to be a higher premium on authenticity. There are a lot of shortcuts that you can take with AI, and many of them are still being worked out, I think. But now and in very short order, AI is an extremely powerful tool to just gather a whole bunch of interesting insight on that person or that company, and then use AI to dump it into an email that is that becomes an outsourced task for you in a sense. And as that happens, of course, the market reacts and people adjust to that reality, and they start to ask themselves, well, am I interacting with an AI or am I interacting with a human here? And so I think that is going to raise the bar on authenticity in terms of demonstrating to the receiver of the information that he or she's not getting some sort of canned, machine-generated piece of content, but it's actually a genuine reflection of what that seller wants to get across. So I think that it's just going to get much. I think selling in general is just continuously getting more complicated, more complex. The expectations on a seller are just continuing to rise in terms of the level of insight, the level of competence that you're required to bring to the task.
To me, there's no questions that an AI could do better in a theoretical world. The question is more like what company will build that AI and when and how. Will they reunite 4 AI hyper geeks in one room, pair them with 5 of the best salespeople in the world, and build an AI that's just so much better than me and would tell me instantly the overlaps that I have with Doug, and all the places we've been, and both of us, without being creepy, that is, sounding cool and so forth, and generating a response. I want to hear your take on that. And also, if you're using AI to stimulate your own learning and or to teach your students stuff better.
Yeah. So first of all, on the point about sales, yeah, I agree. And I mean, I think we're all trying to figure this out as we go along. And I think the basic implication is that it's just going to drive I think a wider division between, transactional selling and, higher end, enterprise level selling. I think you're probably going to see more and more outsourcing of low complexity selling, because AI can easily do the job of what a human might have done, if not much better, right? So low complexity transactional sales, much more AI involvement in that domain. In the more sophisticated selling, enterprise selling space, where there's still quite a bit of nuance that goes into getting a deal done, then I think there's still a lot more room for a partnership between man and machine, and we're going to see, that type of workflow. And so I guess that gets to your second question, which is, how am I personally incorporating this into my own process, and how am I asking others? I'm still trying to figure out and clearly define that co-pilot relationship with AI. And I guess the most basic thing that I'm doing right now is just requiring myself to think, on at least a daily basis, what's at least one thing I might ask AI to do. And so, for example, in our business, it's increasingly challenging. Budgets are definitely being pressured right now, and the sellers in my team are really sort of fighting harder than they have ever had to fight in order to get things done. And so what that means is that you have to be especially attuned to the operational challenges of these businesses, and not come across as just a desperate transactional seller. And so I'm pushing them to use AI a lot more in order to generate new insights on that industry, on that company, as a way to come up with creative angles to stay top of mind with those clients. So it's not to cut corners and just to go back to our product and our solution, but to constantly use AI as a way to generate, new angles that they can bring to the conversation that show they're paying attention to the business realities of that customer. So that's one thing I'm doing. Again, this is very much a work in progress. We're very much in an experimental frame of mind.
Yeah, for everyone, right? This is somewhat new, and it'll take time. On my side, just having Chat GPT results by the side of Google. Then I had this extension, I think it's called Chat GPT Writer. So I can just highlight stuff on your LinkedIn and ask it to summarize it, or give me 10 questions for Douglas for the podcast, for example.
Did you do that for this podcast? Did you do that for this podcast?
No, not yet, but I'm actually going to do while I ask my next question.
Okay, yeah, I'll be curious.
It's more to fill an anxiety gap. I normally don't do it. I try to focus and be in the present and listen to you, so that I can flow with a better questions, because if you just pivot to a random question, it makes less sense for the interview. Another objective that I have for myself is create at least one great prompt per week. For example, my LinkedIn post, right? English is not my first language. So I just feed it my post and I ask it to rewrite it in a simple and entertaining way. Also, my brain doesn't work the same as much people. So I need to make my post way simpler and not dive into a rabbit hole. Or that prompt can be also for Midjourney, since I often use Midjourney for my posts. Any AI tools that you're using right now on your side?
Well, the main things are Chat GPT, and then I use I use Bing, the AI and Bing, in order to sort of get live updates from the internet sources, because GPT is limited in terms of its the 2021 deadline, right? So
Right.
So those are the real two. Within LinkedIn as well, LinkedIn is starting to introduce more AI features now. I mean, from our perspective, LinkedIn's main goal is to create this knowledge marketplace, and this B2B marketplace as well, and then a talent marketplace. And within the B2B marketplace, LinkedIn is just trying to place a bet on having some kind of co-pilot capability, because in terms of connecting buyers and sellers, a lot of the times you don't know exactly what you're looking for with respect to a product or a solution, but a co-pilot can help you with that, whether you're a buyer or whether you're a seller, right? So there's a co-pilot capability that they're going to be rolling out very soon, and I'm testing out a a prototype of it, and it basically allows you to go in and sort of look at a bunch of information on, let's say, Sales Navigator or LinkedIn, about a company, and say, okay, I'm the usual type of stakeholder that I work with. The typical profile of someone who on the buying committee looks like this. Whom should I be talking to in this company? And so then it'll suggest a bunch of people who fit that description. So I think that's a really, really exciting new frontier with respect to the whole B2B marketplace. So that's something that I'm experimenting with.
LinkedIn is one of my favorite companies. You've worked there almost for the past 7 years. I never thought LinkedIn would be one of my favorite companies. I'm 29 years old, and the first time I heard about LinkedIn, I was that I took LinkedIn seriously was in my 20s, and it was like, yeah, LinkedIn is for old people and it's so corporate and yada, yada. But I started really seeing a gold mine into LinkedIn as a salesperson. But the most fascinating part to me of LinkedIn is just being able to dissect companies and understand how they work, who does what. And that's always caught my attention. And the LinkedIn as a company, I'm pretty sure that it's still growing nowadays. The number of users, the number of folks that spend money on Sales Nav, LinkedIn Premium, and so forth. I mean, it's just exponential. It's like the network effects in their most literal ways, built by one of my favorite entrepreneur, Reid Hoffman.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads to a question for you. Like, why have you joined LinkedIn? And do you feel that you're still growing in that role after almost 7 years now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so first of all, before I answer why I joined LinkedIn and whether I'm still growing, it's actually quite astonishing just how much the platform is growing. That you mentioned that it's this exponential growth. When I joined LinkedIn about 7 years ago, it was growing at 3 new members per second. Now it's growing at 5 new members per second, which is a 66% increase from what it was. And when you consider what that actually means, this is a 20-year-old company. It's been around for 20 years and it's still growing. The platform is still growing at 60 members a second. There are about 1 billion members now. There are more than 62 million companies on the platform. So I think it is really demonstrating the power of network effects. With respect to why I joined LinkedIn, I mean, basically, I was going through a career shift, a very significant professional reinvention. I've been working in consulting for a long time. I decided I didn't want to be in consulting any longer because I wasn't that inspired by the end state that I was imagining for myself based on some of the partners that I was observing. And so I decided, okay, I got to get out, I got to do something different. And I realized that one of the obvious shortcomings in my career is that I never really understood sales. I'd done an MBA from a top school. I'd been working in consulting for a top firm, and I'd done all these projects and taken all these courses, but I'd never actually studied sales. And I realized that the growth rate of a company is the most important variable. It's what makes it interesting to work at a company. And yet I had no understanding of what drove growth, on the front lines. And so I wanted to join a sales team. I wanted to get experience as a practitioner, as a leader. And I really felt that LinkedIn was the best place to do it because I'd always been fascinated by Reid Hoffman's vision for LinkedIn. I was really, really interested in the culture they created. And so an old friend of mine who used to work with me in consulting, who had himself made the jump to LinkedIn, invited me to interview, and that's how I started the job. So yeah, that's why I joined. In terms of whether I'm still learning, look, I think the fact that I'm still here is quite unusual. I haven't held a role for this long in any previous company position that I've had. So that is a testament to the fact that this is still a very fast-growing pace. It's a unique combination because you have a company that owns a category. There's no one else who owns this category of professional network, right? And you have tremendous resources that are being poured into this platform, not just because of LinkedIn's success, but because LinkedIn is part of Microsoft, which is itself a behemoth, right? And then you have a culture which is very, very explicitly committed to personal transformation, so to developing yourself. And so I've just been given degrees of freedom to explore and to grow that are unprecedented in my career. And so that's why I'm still here. I have to keep. I frequently ask myself that question that you just asked in order to make it clear that I am still in the right place. Am I still growing? Because if I'm not, then that's when I need to make a move for sure.
Hell of a company. Not sure, like, internally, how is it to work there? I'm pretty sure it's pretty nice. I've read about the CEO as well. So yeah, a very cool company. What did you learn at your time at Accenture? One of my favorite company again.
Yeah, well, so Accenture was my tour of duty with consulting, and I think that consulting skills are really important. It's interesting, a lot of people who join consulting firms are joining in order to defer a career decision. Consulting is the kind of place where you can just sort of feel that you're being productive and doing something, even though you're not actually pursuing a specific career objective. It gives you an opportunity to just work with different colleagues and clients and that sort of thing. But it does teach you a core set of skills that I think are extremely important no matter what you do. In consulting, you learn how to analyze a problem. You learn how to break a problem into its component parts. You need to learn how to structure your thinking in that way. You learn how to collaborate with people because you're being moved from one project to another pretty quickly. And so you're getting a really concentrated work experience, you're, as opposed to, let's say, a normal job where you are in the same role for 18 months, a couple of years, whatever. In consulting, you're switching up your project team. And so you're getting this, you're getting more cycles of learning. And so you're learning to work with different temperaments and different cognitive types. And so that's really, really interesting. And then finally, you're learning how to communicate. There's a really, really heavy emphasis on communicating in a top-down and easily digestible way within consulting. And those three skills, the analyzing and collaborating and communicating are, those are the foundations of pretty much any realm you go into. So those have really served me well, and I'm extremely grateful for the consulting experience.
You've done the Wharton School MBA, you've done the Alt MBA, and now you have the Sales MBA. Give me insights on each.
Well, the traditional MBA is basically just learning the different functions of a business so that you're conversant in the vocabulary of an enterprise. The Alt MBA was a program, or is a program, that was created by this marketing guru, Seth Godin, and it is basically about trying to teach you change agent skills and a change agent mentality. And then the Sales MBA is my attempt to define a mental model for what a sales professional is actually doing when he or she is trying to influence a corporate buyer. And my argument is that that sales in that context needs to be elevated, and you need to think of yourself as a strategist, a change agent, and a decision architect. The reason I say that is you're being strategic as a seller insofar as you need to understand what is the competitive environment for that company and what will it take for that company to win in that environment. That's being a strategist. You also need to understand where is the energy source within that company and how can you feed that energy source. That's what I mean by being a change agent. And then third, you need to understand what are the interpersonal dimensions and what are the principles of human psychology that should govern the way you communicate information and the way that you try to nudge and lead the people you're working with. And that is fundamentally about understanding the principles of behavioral economics and applying them to your work. So that's the basic argument for the book, because I'm trying to argue for a certain framework for thinking about what's really going on in corporate selling.
And what is changing exactly? What was the old mentality vs the new sales methodology?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. A good way to illustrate that is just go and check out a book called Marketing Myopia by Theodore Levitt. It came out in 1960, and it was published by Harvard Business School. And in that book, he lays out very clearly what was the conventional view at the time. He says that marketing is when you lead with the interests of the buyer, and selling is where you lead with the interests of the seller. Seller is fundamentally about tricking the buyer into making a transaction, right? That was the way that most people viewed sales at the time. Today, that's a ridiculous opinion, and anyone who was a university professor, certainly at Harvard or anywhere else, who tried to maintain that was the way to think about sales would lose all credibility, because it's not the way sales works today. The only way that a seller has any chance of being successful is if he or she is tuned into these dimensions that I'm talking about, is able to talk the language of strategy and change and to use the principles of behavioral economics. So I think the bar has been rising for quite some time in terms of what's expected of a seller. And so it will continue to rise, as we've been talking about this whole time.
I don't think we need to look as far as the 1960s to see those methods. One just has to look at the Wolf of Wall Street stuff and Sell Me the Spend stuff. That was like a recent and actual philosophy not so long, especially amongst the youth. So I'm glad that we're bringing a change to that, and we're more focused on long-term outcomes and win-win, and that's how society was built. Trust, it's not by tricking someone into doing something that worked because of scale, because we're billions on this planet Earth, but it just doesn't scale if you want to do business for 60 to 100 years. I want to ask though, what's next for you? There's 3 or 4 months remaining to the year. What's next for Douglas?
Well, in terms of my day job, we've got a big job to do. These are very tough times. And so, the most important thing for me is to make sure my team is successful. And then in terms of my second hat of, teaching and writing, that's TBD. I think I basically need to come up with a new concept for the follow-up book. And I'm not sure what it's going to be, but it will be an emergent truth, I'm sure. So, TBD.
Something around product-led growth, or how sales can work with product to bring amazing stuff to the market. I'll read the book. I'll order it. Thank you so much, Douglas. Very interesting background you have, very interesting brain too. Where can people find out more about you?
Best way would be the salesmba.ca, which is the website for the Sales MBA. And then in addition to that, my LinkedIn profile is a good place to go because that's where I publish a newsletter as well.
I'm Charles Cormier, founder and host at Sales Wisdom Podcast. If you want to start, scale, or